Welcome back to D&D Beyond. My name is Amy Dallen. If you are tuning in after maybe marathoning through all of our anniversary stuff last week, thank you so much for coming back and joining us. And also thank you all once again for turning out in such great numbers last week to help support Jasper's Game Day and Stack Up. We all had a nice long rest afterwards, but we are very, very grateful for all of y'all's support. So just getting that out of the way. Thank you so much. And now, today's stream is a topic I am tremendously excited to talk about with some really exciting guests who I'm forestalling with my very long intro here. But today we're here to talk about Dungeons and Dragons and neurodiversity. And to talk through that with me, I have returning guests, Daniel Kwan, an Emmy-winning podcaster, game designer, and writer, including of Candlekeep Mysteries and more, and co-founder of Level Up Gaming. I am Naomi Hazlett, a registered occupational therapist, managing editor of Occupational Therapy Now, and longtime TTRPG devotee who works with Level Up Gaming. And I have with me the wonderful Marieke Nijkamp, an author, including of the upcoming Critical Role Kith Kin of the Oracle Code for DC Comics, an editor and story contributor of Unbroken 13 stories starring disabled teens. And, sorry, I added more stories to your book. And even if we break, and of course, TTRPG player. Hi, welcome all of you. How are you doing today?
Wow, that was very good. That was very good.
My long plan for how to start the stream. But now that I've given like the brief version, you all do so many awesome things. That was the cut down version of the intros. But if you would please, for folks who might not be familiar with you, run us down a little bit more about yourself, starting with you, Daniel.
What else is there to? A game designer, cultural consultant, one of the co-founders of Level Up Gaming. I'm what I like to call a retired archaeologist and former academic turned, game designer, cultural consultant. I've worked in, Jordan, Greece, China. I kind of take my academic background and, my long tenure in grad school and kind of leverage that in my RPG work. I have 14 years of experience working in museum education, which is kind of where Level Up Gaming started in the first place. Aside from that, I'm one of the co-hosts and the showrunner for the Asians Represent podcast. We won a Gold Emmy Award last year, and we're up for Best Podcast again this year at the Emmys. So super hyped. But yeah, I love TTRPGs of all form, and anything to when we could do something to help other people kind of discover the magic of TTRPGs in their own way. Like, I'm fully on board, so I'm so hyped for this topic.
Excellent. Naomi, can you tell us a little about yourself?
Yeah, sure. So I have been an occupational therapist since 2018, so not too long, but a TRPG enthusiast for a lot longer than that. I joined Level Up Gaming. Geez, I guess it's been about a year. Would you say, Daniel?
I think it's been about a year. Yeah.
It's
been over a year, because the first time you and I met, you came to an in-person session, and it was our last in-person session, which is like so long ago.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's just been an incredible journey. I've been able to bring together, as an OT, my love of TRPGs. I've also been really interested in neurodiversity all this time as well. And, working and doing research and teaching, including with autistic folks. And so Level Up was just a really awesome opportunity to bring it all together. So yeah, that's me in a nutshell.
Fantastic. And Marieke, the many things I couldn't fit into that bio. Would you talk a little bit more about yourself for us, please?
Oh God. Yeah, sure. I mean, I'm mostly a writer of many things at the moment. I write young adult books, regular books, graphic novels, comics. I just got to announce the upcoming Hawkeye miniseries for Marvel, which I'm super excited about. So yes, bringing back the best Hawkeye, which is obviously Kate Bishop. And yeah, that's honestly, especially this last like 18 months or so, it feels like that's mostly what I'm doing. I've been just like mainlining stories to sort of take my mind off other things. But yeah, I am a more or less recovering historian as well, medievalist specifically. So we can also talk about history. That'd be fun. And a RPG player for many years, so I haven't been able to play as much recently, like most people. I tend to GM a lot, and that's been hard, combining that with writing books and more books and comics and more books and comics and graphic novels. And for the purposes of this particular conversation, I'm autistic, so that's what I'm bringing to this discussion.
You're bringing a whole lot of things, but I especially
bring a whole
appreciate
lot.
having that perspective.
I mean,
I
yes.
also love-
Oh no, I
Go ahead.
can bring other things to this discussion as well, but I can also talk to specifically neurodiversity in gaming from a neurodiverse perspective, which is helpful.
And I just, on a personal note, I love that I got to meet you first through rolling dice, and then it was sort of
Yes.
like, also surprise, every writing project that you're sincerely, like, extremely interested in, and tons of amazing disability advocacy, and just all my interests. So yes, I thank you all so much for joining me for today's discussion. I'd love to start, just since we've been mentioning the organization, but we haven't really talked about what it is. Would you tell the folks at home, what is Level Up Gaming?
Yeah. So I co-founded Level Up Gaming in 2016 with, at the time, two fellow teachers at the Royal Ontario Museum, Christian Blake and Kelsey McIver. Christian's also an occupational therapist, and Kelsey is a spec ed teacher in, here in Ontario. We were all teaching at the Royal Ontario Museum at the time, and I was running a program that was using Dungeons and Dragons to teach history and science. So, we were leveraging my academic background and going and doing these lessons in the galleries and then playing D&D in the galleries surrounded by really cool stuff. We would go and like shoot bows and arrows, handle real weapons, like talk about animals and things like that. It was really cool. And it all kind of started when I had a student who was on the spectrum, and their mom basically said to me on the first day and said, "Hey, if this isn't a good fit, here's my number. Call me, and we'll pull them from the program." And I said, "No, it's fine, totally okay." They ended up being my student for 4 years, and I got to see their. I got to see their characters basically evolve into being these really dynamic and interesting like stories. And they would bring in pages and pages of typed notes and world lore that they wanted to incorporate into the stories. And this all kind of culminated in like an email that I got. I was going to Athens to do some lab work, and I got an email from their mom basically saying, "Hey, not going to show up for the last 2 days of the program because they don't want to be your student anymore. They want to work for you." And I was like, I remember being in JFK and bawling my eyes out at an airport, making a huge scene because I was like, "Oh, I can't do this." And then having to be out of the country for a month, having just saw that. And so this former student of mine ended up becoming a volunteer and working for me, and now is off at university, still doing TTRPG stuff and self-publishing books. So basically I came back after that trip and told Christian and Kelsey, I was like, "Hey, this thing happened." And I never thought of TTRPGs as a really powerful tool for that. And since then, we kind of started having more students see similar success. And so in 2016, we basically thought, well, when you hit 18, funding for programming or the availability of programming basically vanishes. And so why don't we try to do something? Kind of leverage the experiences from the museum into doing something for adults. So we partnered with Dreamweavers, they're like an OT collective here in Toronto. And we started offering in-person programs. We would play D&D and have the OT there support and me be the GM. And we did this for years. And then we also do board games and other things. And then when the pandemic hit, was actually when Naomi joined us. And then Naomi and I basically transitioned to doing the entire thing remotely, with Naomi playing not only the role of the OT, but also a surrogate character in the party, to kind of help model, like positive behavior and things like that. And so we've been, Naomi, how many programs have we done during the pandemic?
Oh my God, I don't know.
I do know. We've run five programs during the pandemic, 5 8-week programs during the pandemic, all remotely, and all using D&D Beyond.
Aw, thank you.
But yeah, that's kind of how Level Up Gaming started. Naomi, I don't know if you wanted to add anything. I don't want to take up too much time here because I want to learn from everyone else.
I don't have too much to add to that. I mean, like I said, I'm a little new on the scene, relatively speaking. But yeah, it's been an interesting experience for me because I have not run in person. It's been, exclusively online. And it was during a time that we were all kind of figuring out, oh, what is this Zoom thing? And how do we transition from things like pen and pencil? And, like we can talk about the ways that we try to make the game more accessible later as well. But, how do we figure out how to make the game less overwhelming if we have a bunch of tools on the screen, and what are norms, and how do we make sure the game, everyone is included? So I think like Daniel and I were talking on Monday, was the last day of the most recent session. And we're like, yeah, this is the best one that we've had so far. Like it keeps getting better and better. And we've got so many encouraging messages and feedback from the people that attend the group, and caregivers and family, just saying that it's been a really great thing to be able to do in a really strange and challenging time.
My favorite one was one of our participants said that he is not going to be able to come to our fall program because he's going to college, and he will be playing D&D at college with his friends there. And we're just like, oh,
success.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I think that's kind of it.
Yeah, and that's absolutely fantastic. I know there are a wide range of like folks out there who sort of use D&D as a teaching tool in a lot of different contexts, which I think is so cool. And I think a lot of us as players can attest to, like, I grew up playing RPGs, and I don't doubt for a second that they played an important role for me personally in sort of working on my life skills and a number of other, features of like my personal development over time. What do you think stands out about tabletop games for folks who are either on the spectrum or otherwise neurodivergent?
I would love to hear from everyone else.
I mean, I can definitely, I can speak to my first gaming experience was when I was 15, 16, I think. And it was definitely one of those, like, try it once, never look back, and fall head first into many different systems and many different groups and just trying out stuff. But I think for me, it more or less does the same thing as story in general does, which is give me like a safe, and especially as a team too, like give me a safe environment to try out different things, like different social skills, different ways of being, ways of interacting with like other characters, but in essence to other people, and I think that's been super valuable in like in all those obvious ways, but also just in building confidence in how to interact with like surprising situations and new things and like group work and all these different social skills that, at least to me, never came necessarily naturally. Like for me, how my brain works, every social skill is sort of learned behavior, and it's learning how certain scripts work in certain situations. It's learning like what is expected from people in certain situations, what is considered quote unquote normal, and RPGs in particular are a great tool to figure that out and to have that environment to play and to try and to fail too, but without it feeling necessarily like big or important or scary. It's like if you have a good RPG group, failure is as safe as success is, and sometimes far more fun. Whereas failure in real life can be terrifying. So it's that sense of safety that I think is pretty unique to role-playing games and tabletop role-playing, that I still love that, and it's still a major part of play for me.
Mm-hmm.
I can say personally, I come at this from obviously my own perspective. I'm ADHD and deal with anxiety, and I think it would not have known this in advance, but like certainly TTRPGs for me have a really helpful level of like structure, but not too much structure,
Yeah.
but enough structure, which it turns out is a thing that really benefits me personally.
Yep.
Like, where it's just like, cool, I know what the job is, but also there's a lot of wiggle room, but I know what the job is. So I can speak to that having been helpful. But what have you all found in working with other players, Daniel and Naomi?
You know what? I love like the malleable structure of D&D, like ADHD and anxiety friend too. Like they play D&D for a really long time, and the thing that I really love is that like not only can you, I thought that was such an elegant way of saying like failure is as safe as success. I really love, like I thought that was great. I really like that you can experiment, and that consequences of our actions are can be interesting, and they can be resolved as a group. Um, for me, I think when we see the evolution of our program during the pandemic, one of the things that I think has come up in our most recent session was this sort of idea of mentoring, um, and having players mentor new players, not only in how to learn the game, but also say group norms that we have at our table, and also really like what is possible, what can you do. You see another player who's really digging in and leveraging all the abilities of their character. It makes someone think, well, what can I do? And then they kind of go in and look. And our last session on Monday, I think Naomi we were both really hyped. It was the last session of like, again, our latest program, and it got really intense. Like it got really intense, but everyone was kind of there helping out. Everyone was okay to be like, hey, how about we pause right now? This is getting intense. Let's shift the spotlight to another scene, to another person. And being able to do that in a tense and stressful social situation is honestly really great, because it gives you room to think about what you want to do. So like I thought that was one of the most interesting things about being remote, is that, hey, let's just step back, take a break, and if you need to chat, you could use the Zoom chat, and you could strategize about what you're going to do. Or if you want to solicit tips or feedback from other members of the players, you can do that through the chat or ask somebody, and they can come off mic. D&D is such a great tool for teaching somebody how to ask for help, because that is built right into what the game is, because you are a group, you are a party, and everybody has their own strengths, and that's in and of itself a lesson. But those strengths complement each other. And so you have to ask for help when you play D&D, which is in and of itself is, another life lesson. Naomi, I don't know if you want to know.
I feel like you all covered it so well and spoke so, like you said, so nicely and eloquently to it. One thing we haven't talked yet about is the idea of taking on another identity or another person. It's really neat to see, like, well, personally, just from playing in myself and watching other people do it, try out different personas. And a lot of the time, it's either something that is in ourselves that we kind of want to, maybe turn up a little bit more of the assertiveness, and maybe, or I don't know, like turn down the I don't know, like the insight. What would it be like to play a character who isn't as aware of what other people's feelings are? And that kind of process is really neat, as it reflects, I don't think people are thinking about it, off the top of their heads while they're playing, but I think that is part of the reason or why out of the game, I feel like it can impact you and the way you go out into the world, because you have these different parts of yourself and you can feel confident in them and you can bring them out when you want. And like even just things like gender identity too. We have players who take on, obviously you can play whatever gender you want, but we've had players have different pronouns and both in the game and try different pronouns outside of the game as well. And it's just really cool to have an inclusive space where people can try to figure out who they are at the same time as trying to be somebody else. So there's definitely some magic in that.
I love that the transformational magic at work in RPGs is sort of becoming an accidental recurring theme in some of our streams. We had a discussion I really loved during Pride Month with a bunch of great guests who were touching on the way that TTRPGs had sort of functioned for them in their lives as sort of a either intentional or in retrospect perhaps telling experimental space, which definitely didn't cause the rest of the panel to kind of have that same response. But we have a great question that's just come in from chat from A Cup of Squids, or that came in a few minutes ago, which
username.
Is
a cup of squids. Really, okay.
Sorry, I had to say
squids. Yeah, it's good. What is the best thing that a DM can do to make a game welcoming and inclusive for a neurodivergent player? There's probably many things people learned to Monolith, but there's probably some tips y'all know that I would love to hear.
I have an answer. Does anybody else want to go first?
No, go ahead.
Really having a strong session zero is so important. Like Naomi and I we were talking about like what we're going to do for our next program, which starts in October. So what are we going to do, and how can we make it more accessible and streamline that new participant process? Because we get a lot of veterans now. Like some of our participants have been in every single Level Up Gaming program since 2016. And it's been really cool. So for me, it's like, having conversations about like, okay, these are the safety tools. These are the things that we want to include. These are the things that we aren't going to include. These are also our group norms. So, when we go on our break, we'll go on break at this time. It will last this long. And it's time to be off mic and off camera so you could take a break. Also setting norms about like communication at the table. A recent one for us, I think after session 3, or I guess program 3, we set a new group norm where it's like, hey, if you want to eat while we're gaming, please be off camera. So for us, it's like communicating things that make us comfortable at the table, especially now that it's even more difficult to read body language remotely through like a Zoom call. So having an open conversation and facilitating this kind of information sharing is super important. And then of course, from like a gameplay perspective, it's like, hey, let's talk about what our group concept is. Who are we? In our latest adventure, all the characters were mercenaries. And let's form our backstory around that. And it was really funny because all the backstories kind of said, oh, Naomi's character is the leader. And it kind of led into that. But then other characters ended up taking on leadership roles as the game went on. But having a really solid session zero where everyone can kind of set table norms, character norms, and like literal technology norms, like what are we going to use? These are the tools, and how can you navigate it is going to be so important to making new people feel comfortable. And I'm sure we could talk about technology and stuff.
I'd love to. If I can just drill in without sort of needing to know any of the details about the people involved, how did you settle the food question? Was it something that came up that like it was distracting for someone, and sort of there were discussions behind the scenes that then you all like, what did that sort of, how does the deciding of something like that happen?
I mean, it was pretty straightforward. One of our players said, hey, could you all do me a favor? It kind of bothers me when I see people eating. Can we not do that? And we put it in the norms, and it's been like that ever since. I think it's just, I mean, there's a number of different ways of getting feedback. And that was going to be my tip was I think the best thing a GM can do is make me feel like they're completely open to feedback. But the best kind of feedback is the ones that are accepted or dealt with in the moment, right? Somebody has something they'd like us to do, no problem, we can make that happen. I mean, I also check in with participants by private chat, by phone, by email, during, before, after the game. But yeah, as things come up in the moment, I think Daniel is really great at responding to that, and it's no problem at all. We want to do whatever makes the participants feel comfortable and enjoying the game.
We're a team. Yeah, it just kind of came up, and I think what we did was we continually reinforced that this was a norm by being like, oh, is your camera off? Are you eating? Can you let us know if you're eating in the chat so we can continue without assuming that they're not at their computer, especially post break. Because there were some folks who would regularly, stay off camera and off mic while we were post break, but still be present in the Zoom chat. So we'll at least know, oh, they're eating, so we can continue with our game because everyone's present. Yeah. I don't have any. I think that's my answer.
Yeah, I think to add to that, I think you both touched on like important points, which is checking in with players. It's obviously that session 0 is super important, but it's also, at least it helps me as a player. It also helps me as a DM to just like regularly check in with players and talk about like expectations. What are you looking for in a game? What do you want to, like, what do you need to be able to play the game well? Is anything not working for you? Is there anything you'd like to specifically focus on, whether that's like in story or in game or in like the experience of gaming in general? I think it's important to have that conversation on a fairly regular basis, but especially in like those first sessions, so that it becomes normal to talk about it. And in addition, Daniel, you like mentioned safety tools, and that is something that, like, obviously that's something that every table will figure out for themselves what kind of safety tools they need, but I think it's incredibly important, especially with like neurodiverse players, to talk about like, these are the safety tools we have, or these are the safety tools we can use. What works for you? How can we make sure that the game is inclusive and accessible to you? And especially because I think for most of us too, like, neurodiversity also means that, I think for most of us, it means that there's histories of like uncomfortable interactions with other people, and sometimes traumatically so. And I think it's important to have conversations about how can we make sure that you don't perpetuate trauma at the table, and how can we make sure that there are safe ways for people to tap out if they need to.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna raise
Are you
my
putting
hand.
your hand up?
I don't know.
Or...
I'm putting my hand up.
I didn't know if you're like, yeah, preach.
I'm also like, yeah, preach. I agree. No, one thing you mentioned discomfort, and one thing that just came to mind was like, one other one is that like because a lot of people, especially during the pandemic, are coming into TTRPGs having watched big shows like Critical Role, to mention 20, and all of the amazing stuff that D&D Beyond does. But one thing I think to understand is that silence is okay at your table. A lot of people, watch productions and they're like, oh, these people are so familiar with each other. They're constantly vibing, and they have this great rapport and back and forth. And a lot of people and a lot of GMs will take silence at the table as some sort of failure, and that it's something to be avoided. But one thing that we've done is that, like, if there is silence, it might mean that someone's thinking. And we give them time, and we don't try to disrupt or fill that silence, because we need to give space to people to make decisions. So that's a big one. Silence at the table is absolutely okay. Just because you don't see it on your favorite podcast does not mean that silence is not good at your table. And you should set that norm at the very beginning.
Yeah, I mean, that also, we don't have an editor while we're playing live, so all the
Yeah, that's true.
silences might get cut out. Oh, what was I going to say? I think the other thing that is interesting is the idea around like what participation looks like. And I think Daniel and I, we do have the goal in mind for people to have the opportunity to participate and to gain a little more confidence. But, people in our group have the right to pass. And if they need to take some time or if they just want to kind of take a step back or listen in, that's totally fine. And I think that in and of itself helps people feel more comfortable and ready to kind of take that step forward. So yeah, give people that space and that room to think and to act in their own time.
Did you want to talk about our exploration order that we
Oh
started trying
yeah.
out?
What is
Yeah,
that?
so we were exploring a haunted house recently, and I feel like there was a bit of like decisional paralysis. Like, in other words, everyone's like,
For sure.
"Oh, we're in a big scary house, and like, who's going to do what, and where should we go?" And that's not really kind of manifested as silence. And so, yeah, I mean, silence can mean uncertainty at times. So after that session, we, kind of did our little debrief after, and I said, what about an exploration order? I know we do initiative orders in combat, which is like a really cool way for everybody to get a turn. Why don't we have everyone roll initiative the next time they go into the house? And then, people can pass if they want, but that means everyone will have a moment where they can make a decision about where they're going to go and what they're going to do. And it worked fantastically. And I think it speaks to what we were talking about earlier about it's great to find the right amount of flexibility and structure for each group. And that worked really well for the group that we had. So we are definitely going to be keeping that tool going forward into the fall and beyond.
Yeah, for I guess for a little, I guess since like you can see that everyone got a little bit excited about that. So for a little bit of clarity, we weren't rolling initiative. It was just a flat D20, no bonuses. And basically the exploration order was we brought it into effect every time they entered a new scene or location. So we were actually playing Ghost of Saltmarsh. So there's the manor and spoilers, like it's not actually haunted. And I was really playing into the fact that it wasn't haunted. But there was that decision paralysis. But one of the things that I think was great is that so enter the property, everyone roll a D20, put it up on our VTT. This is our exploration order. And it's not the order in which, you've got like 2 actions above. None of that. This is the order in which you get spotlight or you have the opportunity for spotlight. And so not only did it kind of help those who are like, oh, I don't want to just be put in the spotlight, they know when their chance at the spotlight is coming. And so it kind of removes that anxiety of being called on at random. Likewise, one of the things is that it lets you think, okay, I've got so-and-so's turn. I'm next. What do I want to do? And so we give people a chance at the spotlight, and then combat happens, and then other initiative comes into play. So I thought it went so well for us since, some people will pass, but when some people passed, they said, I think this person should keep going. Because this person's doing something, or maybe I'll wait until they're done until the next round. It was really cool. It was a nice informal tool for us to make sure that we could lessen the anxiety of being called upon at random, but also add like loose structure to which people can actually act. Because some folks can also get excited and want to take over. And the encounter sort of order, the exploration order, allowed us to basically, okay, so we got you here. Let's move the spotlight over to this person next, and so you can get ready, and so we'll come back to you.
That's
I love that.
Great idea.
I also my brain is just immediately going, ooh, structure.
Yeah.
So nice.
It also, I feel like it would help the person who's excited and kind of has the impulse to take over will belong in that order, and the other person who's sort of like afraid of stepping on someone will know their turn is coming, and I could definitely see that sort of playing to general advantage. I would love to ask, and please feel free to keep adding tools as we go, especially if there's stuff we haven't gotten to yet. But I know, Marieke, you've used TTRPGs in your writing. Is there anything that you learned from
Yep.
like letting fictional people at the table?
I mean, I've definitely been inspired by the groups that I've gamed with and like the tables I've had as a DM GM. So it was mostly it in a way it's as frustrating as occasionally DMing for real people, because your fictional people won't make like the logical decisions either and won't do what you expect them to do, and you're just like, oh well, I thought I was in control here, but apparently not. But yeah, no, my last my most recent YA, which came out during the pandemic, so that was great. Actually deals with like, it's a thriller, cabin in the woods type thriller with a group of teens who come together to play an RPG, and actually a lot of like my own experiences, as there is an autistic main character who plays RPGs and who relates to TTRPG in very much a similar way as I do. Like, she isn't, there's marked differences between us two, but there's that sense of discovering oneself through storytelling and figuring out how to fit into a group of friends through like the medium of shared story. And like, that book was just it's hopefully fun for everyone who loves thrillers, but it was mostly my love letter to playing with many like neurodiverse groups and very queer groups, which like those two, surprisingly, not so surprisingly, intersect quite a bit. So it was just a love letter to like discovering yourself through RPGs and murder, which I would not recommend in most situations. But hey,
is
the
this
book needed
even
it.
is this even
It's
if we
even if we
break?
break. Yeah.
Okay, I want to buy this.
It's happening
I
here
I'm
right
gonna
now.
leave the
would
stream
approve
now
of
and
this
go
one.
on my online retailer for
Alright,
books.
see you later.
Bye, everyone.
Like, weird, Daniel's internet connection just cut off right there in the middle of the
Yep.
stream.
Yeah.
So strange.
So strange.
I know that the pandemic is not an ideal time to get reader feedback, but have you heard from folks who've engaged with Even If We Break?
Oh yeah, I've definitely, and there's a specific like target audience for this book, which is definitely just like queer, often disabled or neurodiverse readers who are like, oh yes, this is me in this book, exactly, which is such a delight to hear. It's 100% why I wrote the book too, and it's really cool to see that so many of us have those experiences of like finding yourself at the table, or finding elements of yourself in different characters. And like Naomi said too, just being able to explore parts of who you are, whether that's like different personalities or playing with gender, which is always fun, especially for like the young queer me was definitely like, I don't know what gender is, and I'm just going to play different characters, different genders, and figure out what feels right. So it's, yeah, I've been hearing from many readers who have those experiences too, and it's just really nice to see that this is such a like community building element for so many of us, and it's so essential to not just like the fun we have, but to the stories we tell about ourselves. And that's that's been really cool to see, and really cool to see that people engage with that so much.
That's so cool. If I can just, while I'm diving into people's work, may I ask, what technically is an occupational therapist? We've been talking about OTs, and I feel like I have a good idea. Sorry. I'm so sorry.
I was like, you're late. No, so occupational therapy is basically activity therapy, but occupation is a little more, well, that's the short story. So the idea is that we do activities all the time, 24/7, every single day. Even sleeping is an occupation. And sometimes there are things that get in the way of doing those things. And the way I see occupational therapy and my role is to figure out what the barriers are and try to work with the person to address them so that the person is able to engage as meaningfully as possible. So I mean, what does that look like in D&D? Again, like things that Daniel and I were already talking about, like making a safe space or maybe learning a skill. So, I do that in the game mostly through, modeling how I go about creating and playing a character and how I make choices. And sometimes it's about kind of figuring out how do we, again, make the things around the game accessible. So, like D&D Beyond is a fantastic tool for that because it does your math for you, and it, lays out all the different skills, and there's a mobile version, and there's it's a great tool to add. And I think D&D Beyond has made our games more accessible. But yeah, I mean, that's what OTs do, and I am very happy that I get to enjoy D&D as an occupation and share that and help other people do that too.
If I may ask, what drew you to it?
Well, I mean, like I was saying or kind of alluding to, I mean, honestly, like, Marieke was talking about, I've played game TRPGs, D&D a lot before I became an OT, and I enjoyed them a lot, and they helped me. Again, we talked about the skill building and exploring identity and all that stuff. And so I thought, how can I, in my work, do what I love, as I think we all strive for. I originally started connecting with, we're a small but very enthusiastic community, I think I found, of people who are in the helping professions and also play role-playing games. So in Toronto, I connected with a colleague, Anderson Todd and Michael Goldberg, and we actually shout out, we started researching. We started as a research project, basically because, I mean, I don't need to convince all of you, but meanwhile, my colleagues are like, what is this all about, and like, why are you doing this, and how is it helping? And sometimes research, for better or for worse, kind of helps advocate for these sorts of more programming or more opportunities for people to engage in this activity. And then from there, shortly after that, Christian, looked me up, and we got a tea or a coffee, and he says, "So, let me tell you about Level Up Gaming." So that's kind of been the story. And since since Level Up, I'm also running 2 games at other agencies I work at. So I work at a nonprofit called Balance for Blind Adults. So I'm running a group for adults with visual impairment. And I'm also volunteering running a group at an agency that works with youth with mental health challenges. And so, yeah, I'm not looking back at this point. It's clear that it means a lot to them, this programming. And, either whether it's just having fun, which is perfectly fine, that's a success in my book. But participants are, sharing that all the things that we've talked about as well with me. So I hope it's just, I hope I can keep going. I'm sure I will with Daniel. We're not stopping anytime soon. It's just too bad I only have seven evenings in a week, so we'll have to see what happens as we move forward. But yeah, it's been such a great experience.
Yeah, I can't imagine
always
doing this
throw
during
in
the
some
pandemic
different
without
time
you.
zones.
Sorry?
We different time zones.
Yeah, like
Oh man, yeah.
magic more evenings.
Oh,
surprise,
true.
suddenly
Yeah.
your morning is an evening now. That
It's
totally
D&D
works.
o'clock somewhere.
D&D, it's always
Exactly.
D&D o'clock. We are actually, we're in the process, like 2020. Right now, it's Naomi and I are just running it. We had based on need, we had another group that was primarily board games, but obviously during the pandemic, it's a little bit more difficult. D&D has been like a huge success, and it's so great to just like make an impact. And like honestly, like I don't think I could have done it without you. Right. And us just like our debriefs afterwards, like, okay, well, what if the plot goes this way? Or like our little secret Zoom chats. I'm like, oh, remember that this person has this. And then you'll bring it into the story, or like, oh, maybe lead them towards this. It's kind of nice having like a secret other GM, which is really, really helpful in, guiding play. And saying like, oh, maybe this person needs help, because we each catch things that the other doesn't. So having two eyes is fantastic. And I think in 2022 I think we're looking to run a second program. So we'll think eyes on new OT and another DM. So anybody in Eastern time zone in Canada.
I know I'm the only American on this call, which I love. Speaks to the fact that like D&D is not the province of one country or one set of people. Probably stating the obvious, but thank you all for making this work in your various time zones. This hour has flown by. We have a couple more questions I want to see if I can pop in, because I do like this one. I don't know if there's any simple answer to this, but I had a similar question in mind. Bin son of Ben has a question pertaining to our discussion earlier about meeting people's needs at the table. What do you do if people have conflicting issues? A silly example that they're saying is one person doesn't feel comfortable watching others eat during the game, but another feels uncomfortable if people are not eating. Is there a best practice for sort of navigating if you're like, ooh, specifically the thing that helps this person makes it harder for this other one?
Yeah, we've got one, and not particularly with the eating one. And Naomi, like, if there's something that this is actually no personal information here at all. A big one is audio, at the table. So, we use 3 tools for each session. So I guess we never really talked about structure. So we have, I've got 2 monitors, so I have unlimited power. But we have a Zoom call. So we've got the Zoom call set up so that we can have private and like group chats in the Zoom call. That's where all of our cameras are. Naomi and I are both co-hosts in the Zoom call, so we have control over mutes or cameras just in case somebody doesn't turn off their camera during a break. We have D&D Beyond is where we do all of our characters. You folks were actually really kind years ago, and you folks gave me access in D&D Beyond, which I've leveraged and put to good use here. So paying it forward. I maintain all of the campaigns on D&D Beyond. Actually, in our next program, we're actually thinking of doing pre-gens, so that folks can maybe go look at different ones that we make and then grab them and then modify them so we can get a lot of the structure actually done and out of the way. We then use a virtual tabletop called Owlbear Rodeo. And this is kind of where the answer to the question goes in the compromise. So we had previously used, another tabletop. We used Roll20 before. Roll20 is great, but it didn't work for some of our participants because they had smaller screens and they wanted to have Zoom open and the VTT and D&D Beyond, and just you can only have so much screen real estate. So we opted for a really minimalistic tool called owlbear.rodeo. It lets you create, sort of add. Yeah, I know, right? It lets you create. It's free. It doesn't require an account, and lets you create tabletops that are free form. So you're not tied to a grid if you don't want to. There's a laser pointer that everybody can get. You can paint, draw. It's very egalitarian. But for some folks, audio is really nice because it helps with immersion. For me, it kind of helps me stay in the mood when I'm GMing. I like to have that, and I like to share. In our last session, we had all these sound effects. It was a lot of fun. I picked an NPC with a certain weapon because I had the sound effect for it. But one of the things that I love about Owlbear Rodeo is that you can participate as the GM. You could share your audio, but at the same time, a participant can opt out of it individually. So we really like that. So I really want the sound effects because it kind of keeps me grounded in the story. And others would be like, I don't want the music because it's distracting. So having a tool in place that allows you to be individualistic with how you engage with the material, but also, egalitarian in how it's shared in the first place, has been really key for us. And on top of that, Owlbear is very slick. It's got its own dice roller as well. So we have one participant who likes to make their characters in D&D Beyond, but prints them out on paper. So they aren't using the dice roller in D&D Beyond. So Owlbear Rodeo has a dice roller in there as well. So we have 2 dice rollers going at the same time, depending on how people want to interact with one of the 3 tools that we have.
I mean, I think what Daniel's speaking to is the options. And, I've never really had a situation where 2 people's accommodation needs are needs in general have like completely butt heads, as long as we kind of think about how to make the game as accessible universally as possible. And then I think the ultimate thing is we all know we're on a team, and I think the whole group supports each other in respecting and providing space to meet those needs, on top of providing the options as much as we can.
Yeah, and I think in the next
think
session
it
for this
may-
particular person. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, sorry. No, I was about to say, I think
No.
it may also help in situations like that to have, and obviously that's not always an option depending on like table and trust levels and all that, but have a conversation about why, like what's behind certain needs. Like in the example, if it's like wanting to eat because it feels more social, like is it possible to look at other ways to sort of trigger that feeling of being social together? Are there ways to even just like table setup? Obviously, digital tools are great if you can identify, like make them accessible to identify. Oh god, it's nearly midnight here. My brain just doesn't work anymore. But digital tools are great if you can modify them to specific players, is what I was going to say. But even at the table, there are ways you can like sort of mess with table setup, where people are sitting, what's in like line of sight. Like for me, one of the things I'm not able to sit still for a long time. Like I especially when I'm thinking, I like to be able to stim, whether it's just like rolling dice back and forth, or just like having a chair like the one I have now and basically just rocking back and forth a bit. And that doesn't always work for other people, because like constant motion is not always great, and I get that too. So it just helps to figure out like how can you think of easy practical solutions, but also talk about like what is behind certain questions, and how can you sort of like figure out the answer to the question underneath the question.
Love that. Let's see. Okay. Oh gosh, I am. Thank you all for sending these great questions.
I mean, if folks still have questions,
we'll
they
have
can
to
always
do a
get in touch
sequel
with.
to this.
We can do a
Yes, I'm
sequel,
sorry.
or
Talk to us.
you can always talk to us on Twitter.
Yep.
And I will, in just a sec, I'll get you all to tell me where people can find you. Let's see. Let's go with, if there is an answer, a set answer to this, and if not, that's okay. Rahad 2021 asks, what was the most memorable outside the box thinking you have ever experienced from a player? Open to anyone. I know I've found I love playing with new folks because they have no assumptions about what you can do in the game. So they will try things that I would never think of because nobody told them you couldn't do that. But if anyone has a specific outside the box sort of gaming memory, would love to hear that.
Well, I'm just gonna look through my notes.
I mean, like, not with Level Up, but I had a player levitate a giant octopus a couple weeks ago, and just I was like, okay, I guess the combat's over because there's nothing I can do at this point. And it was like level 1, first time playing, like, oh, okay. But it happens all the time, and I think, yeah, the more out of the box moments, the better. Dan, you got
I have one.
Got anything yet?
Yeah, I do. I have one from our most recent program. So I was just doing a modified version of the Sinister Secrets of Saltmarsh from Ghosts of Saltmarsh, and after they had gone through the manor, they discovered a this like really ornate crystalline egg, which was like the unborn avatar of Semuanya, the lizard folk deity. And it had been stolen by the pirates who were using the manor as their base of operations. And one of the players picked it up and just kind of stashed it and didn't do anything with it. When they returned to Saltmarsh was burning and it had been attacked by the lizard folk. And they were basically like, okay, we're going to go make peace. They made a deal with like the local guard. Give us 4 days. We're going to go make the peace. Don't retaliate. And one of the players said, it was so clever, I didn't even catch on to it. I thought I had made a mistake. And I said, the lizard folk, they're this is where you're going to find them. You're going to head north. And the player was talking to the guard and be like, okay, we're going to head east. And if we don't come back, yeah, do your thing. That's fine. But give us this much time. We're going east. And then afterwards, when I was like running the game, I was like, okay, so you go east. And because I thought I had made a mistake. And the player was like, no, I literally just wanted to buy us more time. And it caught me off guard. And I was like, whoa. Yeah,
That'd be
so
amazing.
like I thought I made a mistake. But yeah, it was really awesome to see that. That was like 2 weeks ago. Or 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks ago.
That's amazing. The deception check
That
that
is
works
so
on the
cool.
DM.
It worked on me.
Yep.
It worked on me. It was so good. It was such a good deception check that they didn't even have to roll because I was like, I must have done a mistake. And then it just went.
Sounds legit.
Yep.
Marieke, I know in your DMing experience, have you seen anyone come totally sideways at something?
I mean, I like the quintessential example of this is when I was a young DM playing with like first time players. It was a lot of fun, and we just like went through like very tropey fantasy story just to sort of try it all out. And brother of a friend of mine was playing this like super excitable, wants to try everything character, who at some point found himself like sneaking around a dragon's den, and they made it out. Like it was fine. There was literally no way in the setup that they were going to wake up this dragon, because they were low level characters, and it was more like mood and setting than anything else. And then he turned around and like actively woke up the dragon. And I was just like, well, there's nothing I can do here. We're just going with this. Which is definitely for me this moment of in no way, I should have seen this coming. I didn't. But I guess we're going with this now.
What happened?
Yeah, don't
chaos.
can't stop.
Chaos ensued.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a thing.
Well, like I wasn't going to be that awful person who was like, well, the dragon eats you now because you're crunchy and good with ketchup. But like the conversations happened, and other quests happened, and they sort of like made not quite an ally out of the dragon, but they also didn't die, and I felt like that was generous enough at that point. But yeah,
it was
it was the obvious setup for me to like, obviously someone was going to do that. In hindsight, I should have thought of that. But at that moment, I was just like, you do what now? But you know that's oh okay. Well, have fun.
And have fun is the name of the game. I love that. That's and unfortunately, we really are out of time this time. I'm so sorry. I really want to keep you here forever talking, but thank you all so much again for joining me today. Where can people find you to learn more about the many, many cool things that each of you do? Marieke?
You can find me on Twitter most of the time. I'm at Mariekeyn, which is MARIEKEYN, and also myname.com. Obviously mariekenijkamp.com, not myname.com. But and you can find all my books there, and comics and other sorts,
including a certain Critical Role book, which is going to be out in October, I believe, which I didn't even get time to dive in on, so you might have to come visit us again. And
good.
Naomi, where can people find you?
Other than our website, and Daniel, you can hit us up with the URL, that would be great. But for me, again, similar thing. I'm on Twitter at my name, Naomi Hazlett, NaomiHazlett, and my website also has that name, plus.com. And yeah, Daniel?
Yeah, Level Up Gaming, levelupgaming.ca, because we're Canadian. You can find me on Twitter at Daniel H. Kwan. That's Daniel H. Kwan. I have a podcast called Asians Represent. It's AZNS Represent on Twitter. We're actually nominated for Best Podcast for the 2021 Ennies. Maybe we'll get 2 years in a row. We'll see. Fingers crossed. But I'm just super hyped to be here. If you folks have any questions, because I haven't been keeping up with the chat, but if there are additional questions, this is me asking. If you have any, you can always reach out to me on Twitter. Happy to answer them. Just give me some time.
Same.
Thank you all so much. This has been an absolute blast. I'm so glad that you could join me for this discussion. Please follow these fine folks everywhere they're doing stuff, and I will see you next time on D&D Beyond.
It's D&D.